Hi, welcome back to EPG. I am Greg, your host. Today we're going to talk about something that's not too cheery, but there seems to be a lot of interest about it, and given the fact that I know a little something about it, I'd like to share. And that is the kind of anatomy of a Soviet execution. Um, I learned about this because I traveled to a couple KGB prisons, a couple torture centers in the former Soviet bloc, whether it was in Hungary or Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, a bunch of other places. So they all kind of share like similar things. And the first part of a Soviet execution is the arrest. So this happens, like I talked about in my previous video about Soviet sarcasm. It was usually when people came to your house or to your factory with rosy, flowery language about how they just needed to go downtown to clear something up. That's usually when people didn't come back. This could happen in the middle of the night. A lot of times it did. Knock on the door, and then somebody would be taken. So you really didn't need a reason to be arrested. It was just, either something happened, somebody overheard you bad-mouthing the state or saying something that wasn't along the party lines. And yeah, they would just come and pick you up. Now, the second part was optional, and this was the interrogation. Now, interrogation could take a variety of forms. Rarely did it just involve questioning. Basically, people's fists did the questioning, the talking. People used brass knuckles, they used truncheons, they used batons, other forms of beatings, other forms of torture. One of them that was outlined in Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago was that somebody took off a prisoner's pants and then slowly started applying pressure to this gentleman's testicles in order for him to confess. There are various ways, other ways. Some didn't involve hitting a prisoner at all, but hitting their wives, their children, killing their parents in front of them, things like that. So that would invoke, no doubt, confessions. Whether they were verbal, whether they were written, it really didn't matter. And I say this is optional because this was kind of later in the Soviet period when, these interrogations would occur. But right after World War II and at the start of the Cold War, interrogations weren't really needed. This would then go to the tribunal part of the execution, which is usually when somebody would be taken to a prison or a center or even just out by a woodshed. And there'd usually be a couple people there, one sitting behind a desk, would just basically list out this person's crimes against the state. Whether the confession was extracted, like way I mentioned it before, or they just said, okay, you did this, and the tribunal finds you guilty. So after that, usually somebody would be picked up by both arms and then dragged into a room or to another chamber. And the last thing that they would see would be like wooden planking on a far wall. Because what would happen after that is there's usually somebody waiting behind a door with a pistol that would then shoot this person in the back of the head. And they put up the wood paneling in case the bullet came out the front through either an eye or through somebody's mouth. And then that person would fall to the ground dead. And the floors were usually pitched in these places with a drain in there so that people could afterwards do cleanup, where they would spray down the room and then kind of take a squeegee or something and push all the blood and brain matter into a drain. And then this person's body would then be picked up and then thrown down a chute that was in another like anterior room to a waiting truck below. And then that person, along with the other people that were killed that day, would be taken out to a mass grave somewhere, usually outside of the city, and they would be buried, or they would be just basically put in a pit, have lye put over them to help with decomposition, and then buried. And the reason why I know all this is because, again, as I said, I went to a couple of these prisons, and one of the things that they said that was most accurate, a most accurate representation of this, was featured in a film called Katyn, which is a Polish film, which basically highlights this whole process from the tribunal all the way up to the execution. And they actually had it playing in the execution chamber when I was in Vilnius at their KGB prison. So that was really kind of, it was difficult to be in a room where so many people's lives ended. But when I was in Riga, Latvia, they brought in forensic criminologists to check all the bullet marks, and it was just something to be in a room and seeing all the dots of everywhere that a bullet went that meant that somebody's life ended. As I said, not a fun topic, but I think that it's important for people to realize just how important a civil society is, where there is a jury, where there's evidence, where there's actual evidence. And it's just, we should be thankful that we live, or at least hopefully live in societies and places where the rule of law is still kind of the cornerstone of civilization. So anyway, just want to say thank you very much for your time, and get out there.